Welcome, friends. We are glad you've chosen to join us this day as we continue our study of the prophet Daniel, the prophet of exile. We have studied through many of the crises that Daniel has experienced. He experienced a crisis in which, that as a youth, he was taken from his beloved land of Judea and taken to an alien land named Babylon. He suffered crises there as he was taken and put into a school to learn the arts of diplomacy and of working for a foreign government, a government that had already taken captive many Jewish captives and would likewise take more and would destroy the city that he loved so well. He suffered the crises of suffering other experiences. But as we look in the book of Daniel, and we look in this 6th chapter of Daniel, we are seeing in this the greatest crises that the book of Daniel records in the life of this old prophet. At the time that Daniel records the events that are here, we find that one government had passed and another government had come on the scene. God had, through Nebuchadnezzar, shown by the dream that God gave to Nebuchadnezzar that there were 4 world empires that would rise, one after the other: Babylon, the Medes and the Persians, the Grecians, the Romans. And God showed that ultimately, in the days of that 4th world empire, the Roman, that God would set up his government. It would never be destroyed. It would stand forever. But Daniel had been the interpreter of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And as he had interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he realized that when God said after him would arise another king, that there would be another kingdom that would come on the scene. And that time had come. In the 5th chapter of the book of Daniel, we find the end of the Babylonian Empire. The last reigning king, Belteshazzar, was slain, and the kingdom of Babylon became the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. Daniel was an old man by this time. He was well into his 80s, 85 or so. And though he was this, he still was a faithful servant to God and to those of his government. And just as he had served faithfully in the Babylonian government, so Medes and Persians soon learned he was a man they could depend upon and have faith in. And so, though he was well in his 80s, he was chosen to be an administrator in the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. Darius was the one that set in order the kingdom and the government in this area. He set up 120 provinces, and over them he set a man that would have authority there, called a satrap. And over these 120 men, there were set 3 presidents. And of these 3 presidents, Daniel was chosen to be one. They were answerable to the king of the empire. And Darius found Daniel so dependable, so faithful, that he proposed in his mind and his heart that he would even set Daniel above the other presidents. And the preference for Darius for Daniel apparently was obvious. And it provoked the jealousy and the anger of the other presidents and of the satraps. And so they sought an occasion to find fault with Daniel. And they looked at his dealings. They could find nothing in the dealings of Daniel that would cause him to be guilty of some chargeable wrong that he had done. And as they reasoned, they had observed something. They had observed Daniel's faithfulness to the God that made the world, Jehovah. And as they reasoned together, they determined, if we're going to find fault with Daniel, it will have to be on the power and the nature of his God. So they devised a plan. the Medes and the Persians had a law that whenever their king signed a decree, it could not be altered. Even the king could not alter what he had signed once he had signed it. So they devised this plan. They came to Darius, and they was one that played on his pride and his arrogance. And they said, "O king, live forever. We want to propose a law for you, king. We want to propose that there is no one that can ask a petition of any man or God save you for 30 days. And if he does, then if he violates your law, he'll be cast into the lion's den." Well, this appealed to the vanity of Darius, and unthinking, and not considering what the consequences of such a decree might be, he put his signature to it. And then these men, once they had that king's signature on the document, they went immediately to Daniel's home. Daniel did not hide his faith in God. He prayed to Jerusalem 3 times a day with his windows open. And this was the way in which the Jews did pray that were in exile. Their windows were open toward Jerusalem, and Daniel was no exception. He prayed to God. And these men observed him. And they observed, and in essence said, "Aha, we've got the thing that will be able to get rid of this cursed Daniel, who is a thorn in our flesh." So once they had that information, they rushed to the king. First, they asked the king, "Have you signed such a decree that no one ask a petition of any one or of any king save you for 30 days, O king?" "Yes," he says, "I've signed that." "Well, is that law true, that whoever signs that law, that once it's signed, not even you, king, can alter it?" He said, "That's right, that is true." And he said, these presidents and satraps said, "Well, O king, Daniel has ignored your decree. He continues to pray to his God. Therefore, he must suffer the punishment that you've inflicted by the decree you yourself signed." Ah, Darius saw now, through the guise of these that hated Daniel, they had appealed to him through his vanity, his pride. He'd fallen victim to it. He tried all day long to be able, through some means or other, to save Daniel from the lion's den. But he'd signed it. The law said once it's signed, it can't be changed. And the presidents were persistent. The law can't be broken. King, you must cast Daniel into the lion's den. Grudgingly, he did. And he said to Daniel, "Your king, your God, will be able to preserve you." Although he told Daniel that, he spent a sleepless, fitful night. He was one that his sleep fled from him. Troubled all night long, he thought about Daniel. Was he the feast of these lions? What had happened to him? Early the next morning, the King Darius rushed to the lion's den. In a fearful and a trembling voice, Darius said, "Oh, Daniel, is your God able to keep you from the fury and from the hunger and the ferocity of these lions?" And to his glad amazement, he heard that familiar voice, "Yes, O king, my God sent his angel and closed the mouth of the lions. I am well, I am fit. The Lord has preserved me. For there is no wrong toward you in my life, O king." Immediately, the king demanded that the stone be rolled away from the place where the lion's den was. And he rescued Daniel from that. And then we find that to those individuals that had worked so furiously to bring about the death of Daniel, the king decreed that all of them, and their wives and their children, should themselves be cast into the lion's den. Unlike Daniel, these lions had no hesitancy in destroying and devouring these cast. Each of these lost their lives, and I'm certain that the consequences that they suffered had never occurred or come to their mind at all. There's a lesson in this, and that lesson is that man has a duty to government. We find that this is something that has bothered men from time to time, from ages to ages. When he worships God, who is the higher power? And man has a duty to government. Paul, in his Roman letter, teaches Christians that they are to be obedient to the powers that be. For there's no power but of God. And the laws that are enacted are those that are decreed by God. And that the rulers are not a minister for evil. They're designed to be a minister of good. But there may come a time in which government decrees are those that are in conflict with God's decrees. What then? Well, Daniel proves what then, because the law of God was that was above all the laws of man. Some years later, after Daniel experienced what he did in the lion's den, a man by the name of Peter and his companion John had been preaching in the Solomon's porch in the temple in Jerusalem. Their message, their presence, angered the Sadducees and the chief priests that were in that city and governed that temple. So they arrested them and they charged them, don't speak any more in the name of Jesus Christ. And Peter answered, whether it's right in the sight of you to hearken unto you rather than unto God, judge you. But we cannot but speak the things which we've seen and heard. Later, we find that they were called on the carpet again and said, you must obey our voice. But the response was, we must obey God rather than man. We do have a duty to government, and we should render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. But we also have a duty to God, and that duty to God is above all things and above all other laws. He is the Most High, and He rules in the affairs of man. Thank you for listening today. We trust that you will respect the law of God and give Him the place in your life that He deserves. And that place is first place. May God bless you. May He keep you.